Hi there, and welcome to Out There, a Cryptid podcast. I'm Josh, and today we are diving into some of the wildest, creepiest, and most fascinating Bigfoot encounters straight from Reddit. From eerie late-night sightings to stories that might just make you rethink that camping trip. These first-hand accounts come from all around the world. Let's dive in. Before we get into the episode, I wanted to share a little bit about it, because it is something that I pushed off for so long, as we all know. I have stayed away from the general Bigfoot cases and stories because there wasn't a great way to crack that monster of an egg open. But I thought it could be fun to continue our pursuit of the Sasquatch by reading sightings from Reddit. And these sightings are from all around the world, so buckle up and put your squatchin' hats on. We'll get into the Bigfoot Reddit stories right after this. My name is Jay, and I have lived in Oregon my whole life. I'm 40 years old. I never believed in Bigfoot, not really. I figured it was one of those legends that kept old men and campfire stories alive. I also didn't want to believe in something like that. Then I wouldn't want to hunt. I thought maybe many people saw bears on 2 feet or paranoia from trees and shadows. Plus, you would think they would have some decent trail cam footage by now. Anyway, at the time, I never really did any research and had no clue about all the decent footage and evidence we have now. I was naive and ignorant. But in September 2015, deep in the Siskiyou wilderness, I learned something that changed my life forever. I learned that we are not the apex predators in the woods. This story isn't for fame or clout. I don't care if you believe me. I just need to get this off my chest and get to know your guys' experiences and how it affected your life. I feel a lot safer talking about it with others that understand. I had been hunting solo for some time and enjoyed the solitude, especially after getting out of the Oregon Army National Guard in 2012. I deployed to Iraq in 2009 as 11B and went with the 41st Infantry Brigade, the largest deployment in Oregon since World War II. I mention this so you know my background a little. This trip was supposed to be a week-long blacktail deer hunt. Just me, my .308 rifle, my 10mm Glock for mountain lion, and maybe bear protection. Never really been worried about bear too much. They usually run away. It's people that I get paranoid about in the middle of nowhere, and the endless backcountry of Oregon. I had packed light, camped miles from any trailhead, and I was excited to fill my tag. The first day went smoothly. I saw plenty of signs, scouted a few promising ridges, and set up a camp near a creek in a deep valley. The terrain was rough, thick underbrush, towering trees, and a silence that felt heavier than usual. But that night, as I sat next to my lantern, I felt it. That awful, gut-twisting feeling of being watched. I scanned the tree line, rifle in hand, but saw nothing. No wind, no rustling, just dead silence. The forest should be alive with noise, but it wasn't. I wanted to make a fire, but couldn't due to restrictions, and I didn't really sleep, just periodically dozing. At dawn, I hiked to a ridgeline overlooking a valley. The morning mist clung to the trees, and I glassed the slopes for movement. Nothing. Not a single deer. That's when I heard it. A whistle. Not a bird. Not the wind. This was deliberate. Human-like, but wrong. It echoed from the tree line behind me. I turned, rifle up, scanning. Nothing. An hour later, I heard it again, this time from below me. I told myself it had to be another hunter, but I never saw a soul out there. And why would someone be whistling? The unease in my gut grew. I'll admit I was scared AF. I had slept better the second night, and justified everything with animals or paranoia. I woke up to a few huge footprints circling the camp. They didn't quite look like a typical Sasquatch print, but they were deep, definitely something heavy. I followed them into the brush, but they disappeared into the undergrowth. I told myself it had to be a bear, even though they didn't look like bear tracks. That day, the forest felt wrong. The birds were gone. Everything seemed eerily silent besides a little wind here and there throughout the trees and occasionally snaps of branches behind me. Then came the smell. A gut-wrenching, rotten stench that made me gag. It smelled like bad body odor and piss, like a mixture of unwashed, sweaty, and old urine soaked into something living. It came in waves, like something moving through the trees. I gripped my rifle tighter. I had debated on ending my trip, but it was late, and me being stubborn, I will justify about anything. That night, I kept my lantern burning low beside me, and my pistol in my lap. Sleep was impossible. Something was circling my camp. I'd hear slow, deliberate steps, stopping when I moved. Then just before dawn, a deep, guttural growl rolled through the trees. Not a bear, not a cougar, something bigger, something that wanted me gone. At this point, I had wished I'd listened to my instincts earlier because I knew this was something I have never dealt with. That night was unbearable. I was shaking and thinking I'm going to be killed by whatever is out there. At first light, I packed up my camp. I wasn't waiting to see what was out there. I had 5 days left on my trip, but I was done. As I hiked back, the forest felt alive, but not in a good way. It felt like it was watching me. Then, about 5 miles from my truck, I saw it. A shape just beyond the trees. Tall, too tall, broad, covered in dark hair, blacker than the shadows around it. It swayed slightly, watching me. I raised my rifle. It stepped back into the trees. Then, to my left, another crack of a branch. Another one. I had the realization I was being flanked. After being in almost frozen denial, a pure panic set in. I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. I ran like hell. My pack slammed against my back. My boots tore through the underbrush. I could hear them moving, pacing me, just out of sight. The whistle started again. One ahead, one behind. Communicating, hunting. I turned and fired my rifle into the trees. Everything went dead silent. Then from deep in the woods, I heard something scream. Not human, not animal, something else. I kept running. When I reached my truck, the forest felt like it was holding its breath. I threw my gear inside, peeled out of there, and didn't stop driving until I hit Grant's Pass. I didn't sleep well for 2 days. I never went back. I told a few close friends. Some believe me, some laugh. But I know what I saw. What hunted me? I didn't go back into the woods for a couple of years. Luckily, I got back my courage over time. Now I only hunt with a group, never alone. And never in the Siskiyou wilderness. Because at least I know they are out there. It is not something I ever want to experience again. It definitely created PTSD for me. I feel like it ruined my outdoor activities, but slowly I am getting back to the woods, but I go with a group. I'm curious to this day if I would have slept or let my guard down, if I'd be a missing 411. I like to believe that they just wanted me out of their area, but it sure felt more sinister than just scaring me out of there. But then again, I'm certain if they wanted to kill me, they probably would have. One of my biggest questions is wondering what their intentions were. I also make sure my kids know to take precautions when out in the woods, and I will advise anyone to go with a friend or a group. I use a tent now, instead of a small tarp, but I pretty much only camp in my class CRV now. Stay safe out there, people. Not all are as friendly as Harry, LOL. Again, please be safe out there, guys. Don't always think you know what's out there. I would care less what others think, just be safe. Also, I need to add the description of the only one I saw. It's a guess, but the thing was tall. It's hard to be precise because I was about 70 to 80 yards away, probably about 8 feet tall. Shoulders were massive and broad, 4 feet or more across. He seemed to be bending his knee a little. His knee seemed quite a bit lower than humans proportionally. I have this image burned into my head of how long his arms were. I didn't see a neck, just a head and kinda cone-shaped, or maybe his hair was just deformed. I say he because I am assuming. I have no idea the gender. His fists were huge, or he had something in both hands. The muscles were somewhat defined even behind its dark hair. I think the hair was really dark, but it could be because of the shadow. But I didn't notice it seemed darker than the shadows around it. Some light was beaming on part of its chest and upper part of the head when he moved. I think some of his hair was a light gray mixed with black. I couldn't get a good look at his face, only part of his nose and up I could barely make out. His nose was big and flat, and his eyes were definitely a little sunken in, with a distinct ridge or eyebrow bone. Big eyes, and definitely an intimidating look. This was posted by a username with an inappropriate word, but you can find the link in the episode description. But this story lines up with a ton of Bigfoot encounters reported in the Pacific Northwest. That feeling of being watched, the dead silence in the woods, and the weird whistling, classic signs from people who have claimed to experienced Bigfoot activity. A lot of researchers believe that these things communicate through vocalizations, whistles, knocks, even mimicry, which tracks with Jay realizing he was being flanked. That's not just some random animal wandering around, that's coordination. The overwhelming smell he describes is another huge red flag. So many reports mention a strong, disgusting stench right before or during a sighting. It's almost like they have a scent glands or just carry this musky, unwashed smell naturally. And the footprints, this for me is somewhat interesting. Jay says they didn't look exactly like a typical Sasquatch print. Now this could be weird, but also depending on the ground and conditions, tracks can look different. But the sheer depth of them suggests something big and heavy was out there, which would make sense for a Bigfoot. Physically, everything about Jay's description seems classic, especially the cone or sloped head. These details have come up in countless reports from Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, which is where the classic Bigfoot legend was born out of. The dark hair with some lighter or gray patches is also interesting, since some witnesses describe older ones having a mix of colors. And then there's the missing 411 connection. Jay even acknowledges that if he had let his guard down, he might have been one of those cases. Experienced outdoorsmen vanish under bizarre circumstances, often in areas with similar reported activity. That's the kind of thought that does stick with you. But what really stands out is the behavior. The way this thing circled his camp, used strategically, and then just watched him before retreating. This wasn't some aimless animal wandering through the woods. It knew he was there, and it was either testing him, warning him, or just asserting dominance. The part where he realized he was being flanked, that's next level creepy. Bigfoot reporters often mention these creatures working in pairs or groups, which makes them feel way more intelligent than people want to admit. Whether these creatures are just territorial, curious, or something more sinister, it's hard to say. But one thing is for sure, when you're out in the wilderness, you're not always the one in charge. Crazy way to start, huh? Now, this next story comes from Rosardians. These experiences happened between 2005 to 2014. We lived in the only residential house in the area for miles. Sparse neighbors were hunt camps or cottages only. very rural and secluded. We were screamed at by something big just outside the light of our fire one night at our off-grid home. Instant, cold, gut-wrenching dread. We'd been having a good time with neighbors who were up at their camp that weekend, just laughing, having some beers. That scream silenced every sound in the brush surrounding and sent everyone home. The neighbors were lifelong experienced hunters, which my then husband was also, none of who'd ever heard that kind of scream before and could not identify it. You could feel that scream in your chest. Nothing screams like that, and we've heard every animal in Ontario forests, all of them, including big cats, which, by the way, do live in Ontario despite the government lying to everyone by saying they don't. Being our home, we couldn't leave, of course, but we went inside, locked up. We went to bed, but couldn't sleep. Could clearly hear something going on outside. Cracking branches, sounds like mumbling, sounds of something circling the house. No insect or other night animal sounds. Just this mumbling, cracking, footsteps, and knocking that went on for hours. I can't describe the feeling of thick fear and dread while this went on. We were too freaked out even to try seeing what it was. Suddenly, right before dawn, there came a real shrill whistle, then a loud, electronic-sounding boop noise from directly over the house. WTF? Everything else stopped, and we held our breath waiting for whatever it was to happen. But nothing else did. Slowly the birds started calling, the windows started showing light, and regular forest life noises came back. The atmosphere lightened up, too, and we finally got some sleep. Another weird thing that happened was this one weekend when we were there was a stench coming from a thickly treed gully area behind the house, off and on, when the wind blew from that direction. We felt watched, on edge, and paranoid the whole weekend. The dog would not stay outside. She did her business and wanted straight back in. Huge dog, bigger than a normal Rottie. Brave, confident, not afraid of anything. Very unusual. We stayed inside mostly, as well after being spooked by the smell, the bad feeling, and the dog's strange behavior. We talked about maybe there was a sick or dying bear laying up in that gully behind the house, or something, but we didn't really believe it. Didn't know what to believe. We often felt watched and paranoid when we lived there, especially at night. We could not really explain any of this. We had no idea then that Bigfoot is real. And no one, not my husband or the neighbors around that fire that night, wanted to talk about it. What makes this story even more intriguing is that it comes from Ontario, far from the Pacific Northwest, where most people associate Bigfoot activity. While Sasquatch sightings are most commonly reported in Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia, there have been plenty of encounters across Canada and the eastern US, suggesting that there could be multiple regional variations or even entirely different subspecies. The physical traits and behavior described here, the vocalization, the intimidation tactics, the awful stench, and the sense of being watched align with many classic Bigfoot reports. However, there are a few elements that stand out as potentially unique to this region. The electronic boop sound is something that doesn't show up as frequently in Pacific Northwest reports, so it begs the questions. Could this be a vocalization or communication method specific to an eastern Sasquatch variant? Some researchers believe there are regional differences in behavior, size, and even appearance, with eastern Bigfoot reports sometimes describing the creature that are leaner, more aggressive, and even more vocal than their western counterparts. The thick forested areas of Ontario, with its vast stretches of untouched wilderness, provide the perfect environment for something like this to exist without detection. And while the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch is often associated with heavy rainfall, dense evergreen forests, and mountainous terrain, Ontario's version may have adapted to colder climates, different prey, and even different ways of interacting with humans. And if Bigfoot is a real species, or multiple species, this account could be evidence that the Sasquatch of the East isn't quite the same as the one in the Pacific Northwest. More on the Bigfoot Reddit stories right after this. Now we're going to move down south to our favorite little stinky Sasquatch. This was posted by the user Pine Devil. I should start out by saying I have lived in this area of Florida my entire life and only experienced my first Sasquatch sighting at the age of 6. When I was riding my bike down the dirt roads, like many kids do, I stopped to get my shoelaces out of the chain. When I finished getting my laces unstuck, I saw a big black figure trudging through the woods in front of me. He was about 7 feet tall and made eye contact, I assume, for about 2 seconds and hurriedly walked off. I couldn't see his eyes or his face. People have asked if it may have been a ghillie hunter, but ghillie suits are poofy, if you catch my drift. His fur fit his form like any animal's. That was my first experience with Sasquatch. Throughout my youth, I started seeing these things more often, always just as they were leaving or as if they were in a hurry off somewhere. I've seen several in the canyons of limestone that run along the rivers. It seems like they enjoy standing around on top of those cliffs and catching the breeze. My most recent sighting was about 3 months ago, when I saw a leg and a wrist disappear into the tree line while I was on a back road coming from work. About 2 months ago, as me and the wife were eating pizza down at the local river, I started hearing hoots and ape-like hollers that ping-pong down the river. I suspect this troop, if you want to call them such, are the ones I've been seeing for about 20 years. I've seen these apes when they were shorter, about man-sized, and I've seen the big one, the dad, I believe, when I was a kid in the sighting I mentioned above, and I believe making a rough size estimate that he was the one hurrying across the road. I don't know if I've ever seen the mother. The ones I've encountered are friendly, or so I think. They're also super stealthy. They make almost no noise running, and I have no clue how they do it. I'd say that if you want to see one, your best bet is to go out when it's quiet, and into areas that are in deeply secluded, natural places. I suspect this is how you get their guard down to see them. I think that if they are in populated places, they are definitely more skittish, as my road encounters have made this theory pretty solid in my mind. This lineage of Sasquatch, if you believe family stories go back as far as the 50s, my great-grandfather, who lived in this area, claimed a big female gorilla would come up to the window when the babies cried. He said she never bothered anyone, and she just seemed concerned about the baby. Obviously, gorillas do not live in the state of Florida. It's not pictures or videos, because, well, like anything interesting, when it happens, you don't really have your camera out ready to film. I wish I did, though. Because naturally, I do sometimes gaslight myself into thinking I misidentified something. Then, I see one again. This one fits right in with all the classic skunk ape sightings that have been coming out of Florida for years, which we have covered before. Unlike the massive bulky Sasquatch often reported in the Pacific Northwest, skunk apes are usually described as leaner, slightly smaller, and insanely fast, just like the ones this witness has been seeing for decades. The behaviors described here are textbook skunk ape, standing on high ground, catching the breeze, moving almost silently, responding to sounds with hoots and hollers, and even showing a weirdly curiosity toward human babies. That last bit, the great-grandfather's story about the gorilla peeking in when the baby cried, that's eerily similar to other reports where skunk apes have been described as observant, even gentle, but always keeping their distance. It is possible that skunk ape truly was just curious or even trying to help this crying baby. One thing that is missing here is the signature awful smell that's usually tied to skunk ape encounters, but that actually makes sense. The stink is usually reported when they're up close or startled, like a skunk. So if these ones are just passing through and aren't feeling threatened, it tracks that there wouldn't be an overwhelming odor. Sticking with the Bigfoot creatures we have covered, let's move to where the Ohio Grassman calls home, from the user solid 5 out of 10. In August of 2016, a friend and I went catfishing at night at a reservoir that borders a state park in central Ohio. It was a very dark and particularly warm night that we weren't having much luck catching anything. I think we both ended up falling asleep in our chairs. We were startled awake by the sounds of a deer screaming in the forests, about 40 yards behind us. It went on for a short time, and then we heard something large, quickly moving through the brush. It sounded much larger than a deer. We gathered our things as quickly as possible and started moving back to the car. The area the sounds came from was directly between us and our car. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was awful, something like a mix of mold, wet dog, and decaying flesh. There were also signs of a struggle. Broken saplings, stirred up leaf litter, and that sort of thing. We passed through as quickly as possible. When we got to the car and unlocked it, the headlights came on. We were parked parallel to the road. Just out of reach of the headlights, we could see a huge, dark, roughly humanoid shape moving quickly across the road and stop in the ditch at the bottom of the steep hill. It looked in our direction, and its eyes reflected a weird orangish yellow color. It didn't look like the eye shine of an animal I'm aware of. It disappeared into the trees and up the hill. We returned the next day for some gear we left behind in our haste and decided to recreate the road crossing to try and get a sense of the size of whatever we saw. My friend is 6'5", and the eyes seem to be at least 6 inches higher than the top of his head. It might also be worth noting that the hill the animal climbed is steep enough that I couldn't efficiently climb it without using small trees to hold myself up. I don't necessarily believe that we encountered a Bigfoot that night. I don't really know that I think something like that could actually exist. However, I am very experienced in the outdoors, in that area, and the speed, size, and awful smell of whatever we saw that night aren't comparable to anything I've seen or experienced before or since. This has Ohio Grassman written all over it. The horrible smell, the massive size, the eye shine, and the sheer speed all match up with the sightings of this regional Sasquatch variant. What really stands out here is the sequence of events. First, there's the deer scream, then something big moves through the brush. The eye shine is particularly weird, orangish yellow, unlike the green or white reflections seen in known animals. But what is the other name for the Ohio Grassman? Orange eyes. Even though the witness isn't fully convinced it was Bigfoot, everything they describe perfectly matches Ohio Grassman reports. Our next sighting is from another state famous for Bigfoot sightings, and this story comes from the user Our Eggplant 2110. They say seeing is believing, and I never believed these supernatural things, or things like Bigfoots and Yetis, until a few months ago. Leading up to the encounter, you could say I heard really strange noises, like people screaming or something like a wolf howling, as well as knocking sounds, sort of like wood smacking together. And then my dog, who I sleep with, would perk his head up and stick his snout under the blinds to look occasionally. Sometimes he would growl, but I'd look out and see nothing. Tell him to shut up, and I'd nod off to sleep because I'd always play it off as some animal or some kids messing around in the woods. One night I was watching YouTube near the middle of the night, and I heard the sound again. And of course my dog went under the blinds and started growling, which was relatively normal, until he started barking and growling. Knowing he normally won't do this, I put my hand on my shotgun that stays near my bed, wondering if someone's trespassing or something bad is happening. I grab my blinds and throw them open, and I see a pair of glowing eyes about 8 to 10 feet off the ground, looking right at me. At first I thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs, but the moonlight definitely showed otherwise. It looked, as I said, 8 to 10 feet tall, with reddish brown hair, and it had a pretty muscular build. I was really scared, but it turned around and ran into the woods on its hind legs, and eventually got on all 4 legs before disappearing. It was pretty hard to sleep that night, but the next morning, when the sun came up, I went out with my shotgun and saw footprints where it was standing that were about 18 inches tall. I live in central southern Virginia and haven't shared this story until now. I mean, eyes staring back when you open your blinds is literally everyone's worst nightmare. Given the location, this could line up with encounters of the wood booger, Virginia's regional Bigfoot legend. The wood booger has been described as a bit smaller than the classic Pacific Northwest Bigfoot, but just as elusive. The behavior here, hanging around the property, watching, making vocalizations, makes me think this wasn't a one-time visit. It was observing, maybe even testing boundaries. But the part that really stands out is the transition from bipedal to quadrupedal movement, and it's particularly interesting. Some researchers believe Sasquatch is capable of dropping to all fours when it needs to move quickly, much like a gorilla or a chimpanzee. But it is somewhat uncommon to see, and there are only a small number of sightings stating this behavior, which, to me, makes it even more believable. For our last story, let's go back towards the west and talk about what running into a baby Bigfoot is really like. This story was posted by the user FlatExam7927. In 2017, my friend and I were on a Squatch hunting trip in Colorado, about 6 miles back into the mountains from Boulder. We would go in the winter so we wouldn't have any black bear encounters, for safety and possibly mixing up sightings. So around 2 a.m. in February, in Colorado mountains, we were 10 miles from the nearest light source, or human. We were the only car parked at the trailhead, and were at our turnaround spot for the night. On the way in, we had done a few howls and wood knocks and heard nothing, so we thought we would give up the search and just enjoy the hike. Before we turned around, my friend went into the bathroom off the trail by some tree. I decided to look around in the snow for anything of interest. The snow was pretty patchy on the ground, but in one spot I noticed a depression uncharacteristic to the rest of the pack. Upon closer examination, there was a distinct footprint in the snow, a defined heel and 5 toes. Each toe mark was curled inward, which to me suggests movement of the foot while walking. The print was about a foot long. I looked around and found another footprint, this time on the opposite foot, about 5 feet up. Then I found another and another, each about 5 feet apart, 10-foot stride. Unfortunately, the snowpack ended, and so did the prints. By this time, my friend had come back from the bathroom, and he and I were discussing what we were looking at. Unless something with a foot-long foot with a 10-foot stride was walking around barefoot in February in Colorado, we were convinced we had found some squatchy prints. We were standing in a clearing in the woods, maybe 50 yards from edge to edge, and we were standing on the far right of the clearing. And as we were looking at the prints, from the other end of the clearing, we heard something large move in the brush. As we looked up, our flashlights caught a large rock dying through the air, hurling towards us, just to the right of where we were standing. As the rock landed, it crashed over the trail, snow and leaf litter on the ground, and we could see that this rock was probably 30 to 50 pounds and about the size of a pumpkin. Stunned, we looked into the woods in the direction the rock came flying. We couldn't see anything, but soon more rocks, then sticks and pine cones came flying near us. With it all increasing, we decided to back out of the area because obviously something did not want us there. We began to walk down the trail. As we approached the bottom of the clearing, we heard from our left a high-pitched, loud whistle, but the whistle came from high up in the trees. Then another whistle, and another. Soon the whistles were coming in loud, rapid successions. We couldn't recognize the whistle, but it sounded like a human whistle, meaning not bird-like. As the things being thrown at us seemed to be following us down the trail, and the whistling getting louder and faster, we decided to get out of there and headed down the trail, only occasionally stopping to look and listen. The whistling continued, but as we walked, it got farther and farther away and more distant. The projectiles had stopped, but at this point, we could hear that something was walking parallel with us in the deep woods. Whatever it was, it followed us for close to 2 miles, near a mile from our car. We heard it get a lot louder and a lot closer. With a quick swipe of our flashlights, we spotted eye shine about 30 yards back into the woods. While we couldn't make out a figure or any features, the eyes were bright, and we guessed close to 10 feet off the ground. But this was a brief sighting, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and then it was all gone. At this point, every hair on our bodies was standing straight up, and the whole experience had gotten on our nerves, so our hike turned into a light jog down the rest of the trail. We then cleared the trees, and we were about 1/4 mile from our car, which we could see parked down the hill. As we got halfway between the woods and our car, we stopped to catch our breath and look around. It wasn't long after when a long, low, and very loud bellow came from the trees behind us. We stood there in disbelief and walked back to our car, giddy with excitement about what we just encountered. We reported this to BFRO the next day, and soon were on the phone with them recounting this story. Apparently, a few other sightings stretching back into the early 90s had come through the BFRO from this very spot. What we couldn't determine then, and why I'm telling you this story now, is to get more information on the whistling we heard, the kind of aggressive behavior we were on the receiving end of. Our guess is a baby Bigfoot in the trees whistling at us, and an adult chasing us off. More on Bigfoot Reddit stories right after this. This encounter is fascinating because it highlights a key behavioral difference often reported between juvenile and adult Sasquatches. The footprints were already a huge find because a massive stride and barefoot prints in the snow in February, not exactly something a human would be out there doing. There are numerous reports of young Bigfoots being more playful and curious about humans, often engaging in mimicry or making unusual vocalizations. The high-pitched human-like whistle fits this pattern perfectly. If this was a young Sasquatch, it might have been watching the two of them out of sheer curiosity, or trying to grab their attention. Then the rock throwing, and not just pebbles, a massive 30 to 50 pound rock. That's not playful behavior. That's a clear warning. Large adult Sasquatch are often described as territorial, and throwing large objects is a well-documented intimidation tactic. The way it escalated from sticks and pine cones to whistles turning into a full pursuit suggests that the adults were actively trying to drive them out. This whole encounter reads like classic juvenile curiosity met with adult protection. The young one in the trees was likely intrigued, but the adults had zero interest in anyone sticking around. There are so many more sightings that we could talk about for hours, but I think this one is a good place to end on, because some of the other stories we found are spine-chilling and would make up for a great Part 2. Each one of these experiences reminds us how mysterious Sasquatch really are, and how even the most hardened skeptics can have their perceptions shaken. Whether it's the sounds of tree knocks, those quick glimpses of something massive, or that feeling of being watched, these stories just add to the ongoing mystery. Some people believe, some people don't. But one thing's for sure, the woods are full of secrets. So, what do you think? Is Bigfoot really out there? Be sure to follow us on Instagram @OutThereCryptids for episode posts, updates, and more. Join our community on Discord, where we dive in even deeper into the mysteries we explore here on the podcast. The link can be found on our Instagram. And if you're loving the show, consider supporting us on Patreon. As a patron, you'll get exclusive perks like bonus episodes, early access, and even more surprises. See you next week.